taking over as the section leader this last year, and also early on in your career, did you ever find yourself having any type of imposter syndrome? Like, oh man, what am I doing here? Am I really good enough to be doing this?
Oh yeah. Especially during spring training this past summer, I was like I remember I was talking to someone in the line and I was like, like I don't know if I'm like cuz Colin this was a day where Colin like really was coming down on the snare line in stadium about things and the snare line's always going to be the big red circle as we kind of know and listening to batteries and whatnot. But I was talking to I actually talked to Dan Gutierrez and I also talked to someone on the line and I was saying things like, I'm a bad section leader. Like I don't know if I should be in this role cuz like I don't know if I have like the intensity needed. Like I feel like I'm too nice and um I feel like, Colin saying these things like it's all like a reflection of me and how I've been leading you guys. So yeah, like, it comes with the gig, and I feel like a lot of other people like have had that at some point.
How did you work through that and realize that that wasn't the case at all?
So I talked to Dan and I talked to someone else on the line, and they were two very good resources, and they were like, well, it's not like you can't control how other people play. And Dan is actually was uh, the one who told me he was like the snare line is going to be Colin's big red circle, so like don't take it too personally. And I was like, yeah, you're right. But for me, it was just realizing it's like, okay, I can only do what I can control, and how can I be better as a section leader to unify the line and get us to all do this thing together? It's like almost like this idea of holding hands and jumping into the pool together. Like, how can I do that better, and how can like I articulate our standard a lot better?
When you first made Boston, were you even out of high school yet, or were you a senior? Or were you a junior? Like
I
the,
was a
the first year
junior.
that you were contracted, right? So,
Yeah, I was a junior.
um, what what was your mindset going into that audition? Were you just like, because a lot of people are like, oh, I'll just go for the experience or whatever, or were you like, you know what, I'm going to go make this line? And why Boston? Was it just convenient location wise, or was there something where you were like, well, I mean, obviously, Colin was responsible for cadets 2016 line. So was that a big factor?
Yeah. So Cadet 16 was the big driving force. And then I started following his work with Boston, especially in 18, because 18 was the first year where I saw drum corps live and I started seeing drum corps live. And I saw Boston in the lot. And one of my snare techs in high school, Chris Lanzarone, also taught that snare line. And I was like, oh, like they're so cool. And I was like, I love what they play. I love playing fast stuff. I love playing a lot of dense things with a lot of notes, and I love how they perform. Like it's stone cold, but there's a passion behind it, and you can really feel that when you're watching that drum line in person. Um, but yeah, a lot of the style, like very detailed playing, that like a lot of things, and show design as well. There were a lot of factors that drove me there. Um, and then back to like, oh, was I just going for the experience? I knew I wanted to go to Boston. I was like, it wasn't so much a bit go big or go home because I was like, if I don't make Boston, I'll go march like surf or something. That was actually going to be my plan, and then I'll go make it. I'll keep auditioning in the future. Um, and I like to play. I kind of at the time would say and like bluff a little. I'd be like, oh, I'm just going for the experience because I was afraid that people around me were going to doubt me, and there were actually a couple that did. Like in my high school line, they were like, I don't know about Boston now, but like try in the future. Like you could definitely do it. And I was like, yeah, like I agree with you. And I never thought I was gonna make it, but I always something like just drew me to wanting to be there so much. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna work as if I'm actually auditioning because maybe I can make this line. And I was like, but I would be like, yeah, I'm just going for the experience. And but I would say that and I wouldn't really mean it. And then it's funny because after Colin contracted me in January, he was like, "Did you think you were gonna make it?" And I was like, No. And I remember Moises was there at the time of that conversation, and Moises and Colin started laughing. And he was like, "Well, you're here now, like why'd you think that?" I was like, "I don't know."
Was that like a big deal when you went back to your school and stuff and told people, "Hey, I made it. I got a contract."
Yeah, everyone was really happy for me and really proud of me.
Were there other people from your school, from Oldbridge, that went on to march drum corps and stuff like that? Because I feel like, as in our travels, I've seen Oldbridge gear like on like people and stuff like that. Is there a nice history of that school producing players that have gone on to do like drum corps and indoor and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's definitely gotten, I would say, like a little less and less throughout the years because a lot of the people I marched in the drum line with, I think, like in terms of when I was there, I was the like one of the only, if not the only person that went to go and march drum corps. I could be wrong. I'm not really remembering right now. But it started to kind of die out, and I think now with the current members of Oldbridge, there's some interest in drum corps again. So it kind of fluctuates throughout the years. Like there was a big boom of it, like in the like mid 2010s, was when because a lot of people, the people that taught me, like were in drum corps at the time or slightly before that. So it definitely like fluctuates, but I think in my case with my years, it was definitely the COVID pandemic. Like people just kind of found like better things to do. And you know, dropping everything to leave home for 3 months is a lot, especially those who like work and whatnot. So yeah, I was kind of one of the only people that did, but it's making a comeback. There's some Oldbridge kids now that are expressing interest in marching.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, because they, I mean, from what we've seen, they play really well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Hey, I was going to ask. We talk about indoor. Have you ever gone to do any of the independent indoor lines at all? Or is that like anything you've been part of, like United or anything like that?
I haven't. Beltran asked me about doing United, and I was like, I don't think I can with the commute. If I was living in New Jersey,
I was going to say, is your schedule just too busy to do that?
yes, I could make it work if I want to, but it's for me it's like a commute thing because I go to school in like Western Massachusetts, which is practically the middle of nowhere, and like one of the closest things is United. And that's like a 5 hour drive. If I was like living at home from because United's only like an hour from Oldbridge, there's a good amount of Oldbridge United crossover. But for me it's just a commute thing at the end of the day, and there's not really anything super close by, and it's like, well, I have to kind of move classes around so I don't have class on Friday, which is pretty hard to do with my major because a lot of classes do fall on Friday. So it's just something that kind of doesn't work out. But in terms of like workload in school, like I could make it work, and I would love to march indoor if there was something closer, but unfortunately there's not.
Any regret about that? I mean, if it's not workable, it's not workable, right? But is there any part of you that goes, when it's all said and done, it would have been nice? I mean, obviously it would have been nice, but is there any part of you that sort of regrets not being able to do the indoor at the independent level?
Yeah, there was at first, because I wanted to go out to United for the 22 season, but then I was like, wow, that's just not possible to like learn an indoor packet with while learning like a college like things for college marching band. Especially with college marching band, there's so many new things just getting like thrown at you because it's like, oh, we got to do this event here. We're gonna learn this new chart. We gotta put this new field show together, like whatnot. And I was like, oh dang, maybe I could have made it work. And then like at the end of that indoor season, I was like, maybe I could have made it work. Especially because I ended up taking that semester off in the spring. I was like, maybe I could have made it work, but also like, and especially after last year, like doing my first full year of school, I was like, dang, I really liked having my weekends off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. That commitment, I'm sure, for any indoor line has got to be just crazy.
Well, and also it's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's this artificial limitation or this arbitrary limitation of you can only do it for so long, right? There's a cutoff. So a lot of, young performers, they sort of sacrifice everything and almost mortgage a little bit of their future, just to be able to do it. When sometimes you need to make the more sustainable decision, something where you're like, it would be nice, but I do have to think about, being able to keep my head above water and also keeping your life moving forward while it's happening. I wanted to ask, what was the pandemic like for you? And because we've had some. It's one thing going through it as adults, but it's another thing going through it while you're performing, being so young, and having to deal with that. We talked a little bit like with Jacob Wetzel about it, who was a performer, and sort of had seasons taken away from him during that time. I remember, I think Boston did some stuff virtually that first season, and then obviously you guys came out during the shortened year. But what was it? Is there anything about that time that you want to talk about as far as like what it was like for you?
Yeah, so it was a little unfortunate because that was COVID kind of hit when my junior year of high school. So, and Oldbridge didn't really do anything for the 21 season. We did like a combined middle school and high school like drumline thing. But I didn't have my last 2 seasons of my senior year, which kind of sucked. But the way I like looked at it and the way I still do is I had years in DCI, and lucky enough I was committed to a DCI corps before like the COVID like crap storm kind of hit us. So I was like, oh, I got like a million years left of drum corps. So I was insanely grateful for that. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of other people who were like near their age out, who aged out in 20 or 21 and stuff like that. Like, I empathize with those people a lot, and that really sucks that they got that taken away from them. But I'm extremely grateful and lucky that I was at like a young age. In terms of like marching drum corps, I was at a young age where it didn't really affect so much of my future, because I was like, oh, I got like X amount of seasons left that I can, I have, or X amount of full seasons left, I should say.
When you went back in 21, was it mostly all through like via Zoom camps, and then you guys got together just prior to that shortened tour? Or how did that audition work for the 21 season?
So for 21, we had like our backstage where people like could audition and like post videos for feedback and like learn from these educational videos provided by the staff. But we actually weren't really auditioning because most of the battery for 2020 came back. I think like only 2 or 3 people like didn't come back from 20 to 21, and I think we only took on like 3 or 4 new members, because we were going to go with 8 snares in 21, but we went with 9, or 8 snares in 20, but we went with 9 in 21. So we had people still audition via video, but there weren't a lot of spots to fill. We actually didn't do any virtual camps, so we did video assignments, I think starting in like December or January or something like that. And we did video assignments like weekly or bi-weekly. I can't remember how often they were. And then we got together for the first time, like all organized in 21, like on July 2nd or whenever it was. I think we had like a full percussion meeting and like a full battery meeting some point before then via Zoom, but there was no playing involved. It was just a bunch of logistics explaining how the season was going to work and things like that. So yeah, we all never like played together before hitting our first downbeat together in 21 in person. And
that would have been your first time playing in a line, like for real, like, having to do it
in front of somewhat of a crowd. And,
and so it's interesting. I'm actually curious, that shortened season and it, not being competitive, at least not being judged, right? It being a more shortened tour, did that make your transition from doing high school to doing drum corps, did that make it easier or did it make it harder? Because the training period was maybe a little bit more condensed and limited. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely made it a lot easier because I was getting my first tour was a shorter tour. Because I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I don't think I could have handled a 12-week tour like straight out of high school. That's a lot, especially at the level that Boston's at. Like that's a lot, and I didn't realize how much it was until I did my first season. So I kind of lucked out with the shorter season. We also didn't compete, so it was like, all right, I get my feet wet, I get the experience, and it definitely helped me a lot in 22, like going on to doing a longer tour. Yeah, if I didn't have that 21 season under my belt, you know, and like getting into it, like it helped ease my way into it, if that kind of makes sense.
So we have the 21 season, and which was non-competitive. Now we go into the competitive 22 season, and that line comes out, and it's just like
Fire
and just fun, and the beats are just off the charts.
Did you guys know?
Yeah. When did you realize that line was? I'll be honest, man. It's a special line, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all the kind words. That means a lot. So I had really good feelings about the line after we all first played together at April camp, because we had like satellite auditions, but our January camp actually ended up getting canceled due to like the COVID outbreak that happened during that time. So the first time we all played together as a group was April camp. And there were some things that sounded pretty darn good for April camp, and I was extremely hopeful about where we were going to go. And I felt that way a lot throughout spring training too. I was like, oh, like the progress we're making in one day as a full line is just like insane. And I was like, I think, you know, I anticipate good things happening for this line. And I'm like, oh, we're going to make like Boston like better than it ever was. And we kind of like, we're like, oh, let's be better than 18. We were like, cause you know, 18 was the best Boston battery in our eyes. And we were like, yo, like we have harder book, but we still want to be better than 18. Like, you know, we had a lot of like drive to be the best versions of ourselves for sure.
You know, it's funny you talk about 18, and you mentioned Dan Gutierrez, and he was actually over here the other day just hanging out, and we were talking about 18 because I really love that 18 show.
Mm-hmm.
That the drum solo could be a little bit longer, but you know that was just fantastic. I say that jokingly, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that solo was nice put together. But he was saying that, you know, that them as a line probably didn't realize at the time that was a special line. You know, let's face it, that was like, I want to say 18 and then 22 are like stepping stones for the Boston line. I don't know if stepping stones the right word. You know what I'm trying to say.
A lot of really good things coming together.
Yeah.
Right. So I think 21, like, I think a lot of different corps approached the shortened season differently, right? And Boston benefited from not necessarily taking it more seriously, but laying a really good foundation, and also like, you know, trotting out reds and showing people that even though this is a half season or whatever, that we're still going to hold it to a high standard, right? So that sets a good foundation for you guys coming into 22. But also, there was something really interesting musically about 22. I remember when Goots talked to us about Snake, about that feature, and about you know, like the groupings of 7 and all of this stuff. Because I think adding Colin to that sort of like framework, it enabled something to be created, right? That was just like, what is that? You know, on top of it's being performed at this really like high level. It's just like all those things sort of coalesced. And you guys were performing it at a high level early, right? So it was like everybody was being put on notice. And then now all of a sudden it has momentum, you know? So much so that we came out and visited. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
but,
It was like the day after your guys' free day, so you probably not going to remember this. But
So
Oh, I
so
remember Corpus Christi.
yeah,
Corpus
yeah,
Christi.
Corpus Christi. It was hot.
here's what I'm
Yeah.
going to say. It was hot.
The beats were fire, so
beats
maybe
were
that's
fire,
why it was so hot.
But also we walked into that rehearsal like, what like are they going to kick us out of this rehearsal?
Oh yeah,
like
we kind of got the vibe like we're gonna get beat up. you
well,
know?
yeah, because I have a friend, like one of the guys I marched with is really good friends with Colin. So he sort of cleared it with Colin, and then when we rolled up, we talked to the publicity, like media relations
their media
person.
yeah, their
Cleared it
social
with
media
them.
person, yeah.
But that doesn't, and we knew Goots,
Yeah.
and he was there. But that doesn't mean like when it's hot and you guys are about to go into an afternoon block, and all you want to do is sort of clean, and like get better.
And it's the day after free day.
And it's the day after free day, and maybe there was a head change or something, and we're setting up audio recorders, we're asking you guys to wear GoPros, we're setting up cameras. Like, was it a little bit like, come on?
Honestly, I didn't mind. I was like, cool, this is more footage I'm going to have when I'm like 30 and I can't do this anymore. So it's something nice to look back on. And, there is like a little comedic aspect of it because, like, you guys acknowledged, it's the day after a free day. It's really hot and humid out here. And actually, yes, there was a head change done before that free day. I think. If not, it was like the morning of where we literally did a head change and we're like, oh, we kind of sound like doo-doo. But like, we out here,
But what's great is that probably, my favorite set of videos that we shot that year, because when you put it all together, like being able to hear Beltran and the way he was, running you guys through rehearsal, and the little comments from the text and stuff like that, it actually became a really great, instead of just like another video of you guys playing through this stuff, actually being let in to how you work something like that, right? And showing how you achieve, how you create all of that achievement that everybody's going so nuts over, was really beneficial. I mean, we've gotten comments from people that are like, those videos, either like make me want to teach, or they make me want to like
Perform, be in Boston. Somebody
be in Boston.
Yeah.
So we appreciate that was allowed, right? And it ended up being like really, really great.
I don't know if you know this or not, but like some of the videos I took, I'm like, oh, let me start this TikTok account. And they were like some of the early TikTok videos I put on the account, and they went viral. I don't know if you know that or not. Like,
I remember that.
yeah. And I'm like, whoa. And it's weird because like the drumcore coffee shop TikTok is like completely just like mostly non-drumcore people. So you just get the randomest, wildest comments on there sometimes. But I was like, wow, these are hitting like over 1 million views, and I just thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
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 So, and I think you talked about it a little bit, like early season feeling like this could be special, but what's it like for those, on the outside, right? What's it like to go through a season like that where all of a sudden, like, oh, we're getting mobbed in the lot. Like, we need to sort of elbow for space and make sure that and there is so much attention, because not everybody gets to experience that, right? And also, like, living it is its sort of like own thing, getting to actually go through that is a very special experience and memory for you. What was that first season where all of a sudden, like, okay, you guys are, have all this attention on you?
Yeah, it was definitely the 22 season for sure. I'm trying to remember what show it really was where the lot kind of just blew up with people. I think it was like right after our like New England tour, like right after like those early July shows. I can't remember for the life of me where it was, but I remember it got progressively larger and crazier throughout the whole season, like Atlanta and
Atlanta, yeah. I remember
was
watching
Atlanta
those
was
videos.
nuts. Allentown was even more nuts, and then I think it was semis. Semis was actually a crazy lot. Like biggest lot I think I've ever performed in, and biggest lot of that season for sure. Like there were literally like seas of people enclosing us, and I was like, this is crazy. Like I've only seen these things happen in like indoor, but I've never seen this happen in outdoor before. I've never like experienced that, and it was nerve-wracking. I was thinking more about like not messing up, don't break, as opposed to like embracing it and like, oh, let's do this. That's where like last season is where like I really started to embrace it and appreciate it a lot more, but it kind of scared me initially because again it was just that new experience, but kind of learning more about those kinds of things and being a performer and like navigating through like stage fright and things like that, I was like, these people are here to literally see like me and my drumline play, and they're here to watch us, and they're here because they appreciate what we do, and they're just looking to have a good time, and they're looking to be entertained, and I was like, if I can, I guess, if me and like the Boston Battery, if we can make somebody's day, if we can inspire someone to come march here, it's a really cool thing, and I'm so grateful to get to be a performer in that sense, and it's just awesome.
Is it hard to be present during that? Like, rather than being preoccupied with like what hasn't happened yet, right? Or the outcome of this, or what this sort of, however you perform in a certain moment, what that's going to mean, right? And how that's going to impact you, versus just like you're there right now, like this is happening and you're just able to take it all in. Is that difficult? Is that something you were able to do? Or were you always sort of thinking about, again, like what's going to happen in the future, or maybe just like what just happened a few moments ago?
Yeah, it is insanely difficult to stay present. And it's another thing I've been managing throughout the years of doing it as well. But it's very easy, especially when you're hyped up on adrenaline and things like that, for like chatter to start happening. And it's something that like doesn't go away. You just get better at dealing with it. That's like a quote from Andrew Ricketts, the bass tech. But when he kind of said that to me, like early season last year, I was like, oh yeah, he's right. Because I was like hyper fixating on like, how do I stop like being nervous? How do I stop having like these insane thoughts? And it's just, you gotta like control it over time. But it's definitely something that like on a good day where like I'm gonna just use a wild example here, but at the Hattiesburg regional this past summer, I was just over getting sick. Like this was 2 days after the Mesquite show, and I was sick with whatever. And that morning I woke up and like threw up. Sorry if that's like a TMI, but I was like, oh, and then I like was like, okay, I'm gonna go do rehearsal, I'm gonna go do the show and whatnot, like I'm fine. And then I get to the lot and I felt like really nauseous, and I was like, and in a way it like calmed me down and it lessened my distractions in a way, and that was like the best I've ever played in a lot in my life. Like as crazy as that sounds, but it's one of those things that like ebbs and flows, to go back to that. Like there are some days where I'm like, all right, my brain is just white noise and I'm here right now. And then there are other times where I'm like, who was that? What was that? And one thing that actually helped me a lot, like navigating through all of that and to help me stay present most of the time, was like just staring straight ahead. Because I noticed my mistake was whenever I would get like distracted or too chattery or whatnot, I'd be like looking around, like my eyes would, I kind of have the crazy eyes a little bit. And then I stopped doing that, and it made a whole lot of a difference. But yeah, it's one of those things that like, some days it's more manageable than the others, and it obviously depends on like the crowd size too, and the tameness of the crowd as well, I'll throw in there.
You know what's interesting about what you just said is that there's actually a little bit of, and I don't pretend to understand it, but there's a little bit of science behind what you're talking about with the eyes. I remember Nick RC, in sort of like the stuff that he was studying, he turned me on to a neuroscientist podcaster named Andrew Huberman. I think in the stuff he was studying, there was some adjacent sort of lab work that was going on where he turned on to that stuff. But I remember Andrew in one of his interviews talking about what happens with your eyes and whether you're like focused on things, like sort of like darting around. That's a very primitive, trying to identify the danger kind of thing, right? And that puts you in a certain physical state, right? Versus being able to, sort of not have to worry about identifying and just being able to, focus straight ahead and maybe even like relaxing your focus, puts you in a state that's obviously like a little bit less elevated, a little bit more calm. I just think that's really interesting because everybody, I had it. I was very like, I noticed I would do things with my eyes involuntarily as a response to anxiety when I performed. Like that, some people do it with their mouth, but or something, or with their shoulder, with their arms. But I just thought that was really interesting.